I want you to give me anything you can recall about this male party that approached the guys, okay?
He was like a man with a big, he had like a, was this for like nylon thing, as a mask?
You know what color it was?
Black.
He grabbed Jacob and then he told me to run as fast as I could into the woods or else he'd shoot.
3 boys. 3 bikes. 1 trip to the video store. Only 2 of them came home. The third boy, 11-year-old Jacob Wetterling, vanished into the darkness on a quiet Minnesota road. And here's what will make your blood run cold. The man who took him was interviewed by police within weeks. His shoes matched the footprints at the scene. His tires matched the tracks. He had suspicious photographs of young boys in his house. And they let him go. For 27 years, Danny Heinrich walked free while investigators destroyed an innocent man's life chasing the wrong suspect. For 27 years, Jacob's parents kept a porch light burning, waiting for their son to come home. And for 27 years, a small piece of red fabric stuck out of the ground in a cow pasture 30 miles away. Waiting to be found. This is Cold Case Beacon. And this is the abduction that ended America's innocence. If you're ready for the full story, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what you're about to hear will change the way you think about safety, justice, and how easily a monster can hide in plain sight. October 22, 1989. 9:15 at night. St. Joseph, Minnesota. A town of 2,500 people where the police chief didn't even carry a gun. The kind of place where parents didn't lock their doors. Where kids rode their bikes after dark without a second thought. Where evil was something that happened somewhere else. Until that night. 3 boys are pedaling home from Tom Thumb convenience store. They've got the Naked Gun on VHS. They're laughing. Talking about the movie they're going to watch. Jacob Wetterling, 11 years old. His little brother Trevor, 10. Their friend Aaron Larson, 11. They're maybe 2 minutes from home. 2 minutes from safety. From Jacob's house at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac surrounded by cornfields. They can practically see the porch light. Then a man steps out of the shadows. Dressed all in black. Wearing a mask. He's got a gun. "Stop," he says. His voice is raspy. Cold. "Throw your bikes in the ditch. Get down on the ground. Face down. Now." At first, the boys think it's a prank. Maybe older kids messing with them. Then the man speaks again. And they realize this is real. Trevor's lying face down in the ditch. His heart is pounding so hard he can hear it in his ears. The man walks over to him. "How old are you?" 10, Trevor says. His voice is shaking. "Get up. Run into the woods. Don't look back. If you look back, I'll shoot you." Trevor runs. Now it's just Jacob and Aaron. The man orders them to stand up. In the darkness, with only the light from Jacob's flashlight, he starts touching Jacob. Groping him through his clothes. Then he asks their ages. 11, Aaron says. 11, Jacob says. The man makes his choice. He tells Aaron the same thing he told Trevor, "Run. Don't look back. Or I'll shoot." Aaron runs into the darkness. He's running so fast he catches up with Trevor in the woods. And then they do the one thing they were told not to do. They look back. Jacob is gone. The masked man is gone. No sound of a car. No sound of a struggle. Just empty darkness and 3 bikes lying in a ditch. It's 9:20 p.m. The last time anyone would see Jacob Wetterling alive. Trevor and Aaron reached the Wetterling house screaming. Their neighbor Rochelle, who was babysitting Jacob's little sister Carmen, doesn't understand at first. The boys are hysterical. Crying. Trying to explain. Someone took Jacob. He's gone. A man with a gun took him. Rochelle runs next door. Gets her dad, Merlin Jerzak. Merlin calls Patty and Jerry Wetterling at the dinner party 25 miles away. You need to come home. Now. Jacob's been taken by a stranger. Then he calls 911. The dispatcher is having trouble understanding. Merlin wasn't there. He's getting the story secondhand from terrified kids. Eventually Trevor gets on the phone. A man stopped us on the road. He had a gun. He took my brother. What did he look like? Short. Stocky. Wearing all black. He had a raspy voice. Did you see a car? No. He was just on the road. The first police officers arrive at 9:45. 25 minutes after Jacob disappeared. And here's where the investigation makes its first catastrophic mistake. Instead of immediately setting up roadblocks, instead of launching a pursuit, the officers spend the next hour questioning Trevor and Aaron like they're suspects. They don't believe the boys. They think maybe the kids were playing with a gun and accidentally shot Jacob. Or maybe Jacob ran away and his friends are covering for him. It's not until 10:45, 90 minutes after the abduction, that they finally start an actual search. 90 minutes. Think about that. In 90 minutes, you can drive from St. Joseph to Wisconsin. To South Dakota. To Iowa. You can be anywhere. And that's exactly what Danny Heinrich was counting on. Law enforcement eventually mobilizes. Hundreds of officers. FBI. Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. Helicopters. Bloodhounds. Volunteers forming human chains stretching down country roads. By morning, the story is on every news station in Minnesota. By afternoon, it's national. The Wetterlings' quiet life becomes a media circus. News vans parked on their street. Reporters calling every hour. Strangers showing up to offer help or sympathy or just to be part of the story. Jerry and Patty do interview after interview. They plead with whoever took their son. Please, Jerry says, his voice breaking. Please bring him home. I'll do anything. Pay anything. Just bring my boy home. They hold press conferences. They appear on America's Most Wanted. They talk to psychics and investigators and journalists. Anything to keep Jacob's name in the public eye. Anything to bring him home. At the crime scene, investigators find two pieces of physical evidence. Footprints. Tire tracks. That's it. Nothing else. No weapon. No clothing. No blood. Just prints in the dirt on a gravel driveway. And here's the thing that will haunt this case for decades. The officers never knock on the door of the house at the end of that driveway. A man named Dan Rassier lives there. An elementary school music teacher. He's home alone that night. Around 9 p.m., right before the abduction, Dan's dog starts barking. He looks out the window and sees headlights in his driveway. A car. It turns around and leaves. Dan goes back to bed. Later, the dog barks again. This time Dan sees men with flashlights walking around his property. He thinks someone's stealing his firewood. He calls 911. The dispatcher tells him the men are police officers. They're searching for a missing boy. Dan goes outside. Offers to help. Suggests they search his farm buildings. But nobody asks him the one question they should have asked. Did you see anything unusual tonight? Nobody asks about the car. This oversight will destroy Dan Rassier's life 20 years later. But we'll get to that. The search goes on for weeks. Thousands of volunteers comb through forests and fields. They search abandoned buildings. They drag lakes. They follow up on thousands of tips. On October 26, deputies on horseback searched the woods around the Wetterling house. Nothing. On October 29, 225 National Guard troops join the effort. Still nothing. People release white balloons after a church service. A symbolic gesture. Hope floating into the sky. But Jacob isn't found. Not in the woods. Not in the lakes. Not anywhere. It's like he vanished into thin air. Meanwhile, Patty and Jerry establish a new routine. Every night, they keep the porch light on. A signal to Jacob that the way home is always open. Every year on his birthday, February 17th, they light a candle on a cupcake. One candle. Waiting for Jacob to blow it out. They create the Jacob Wetterling Foundation to help other families of missing children. They refuse to give up. They refuse to let their son become just another statistic. December 16, 1989. Less than 2 months after Jacob disappeared. FBI agents are following up on a lead that connects Jacob's case to another crime. A boy named Jared Skirrell. 9 months earlier, January 13, 1989, Jared was walking home alone in Cold Spring, Minnesota. About 10 miles from St. Joseph. A man in a blue car pulled up beside him. Asked for directions. Then the man got out of the car. "I have a gun," he said. "Get in the car. Now." Jared climbed into the back seat. The man told him to lie down and put a hat over his head. As they drove, Jared could hear a police scanner in the front seat. The man drove for 10 to 15 minutes. Then he pulled onto a gravel road. Got in the back seat. And sexually assaulted 12-year-old Jared. Afterward, he drove Jared back toward town. Dropped him off a few blocks from home. "Run," the man said. "Don't look back. If you look back, I'll shoot you." The same words Trevor and Aaron would hear 9 months later. The FBI thinks the cases are connected. So they start looking at suspects who fit the profile. Men who live in the area. Men with access to vehicles. Men who might have a history of interest in young boys. One name keeps coming up. Danny James Heinrich. 30 years old. Lives in Paynesville, about 30 miles from St. Joseph. On December 16, FBI agents knock on his door. They ask him about Jacob Wetterling. About Jared Skirrell. Heinrich says he doesn't know anything about either case. But he's cooperative. He gives them hair samples. He lets them take impressions of his shoes. He lets them examine his car tires. The agents compare the shoe impressions to the footprints at the Wetterling crime scene. Close match. They compare the tire impressions to the tracks in the dirt. Close match. But not definitive. Not enough for a charge. They keep watching him. They get a search warrant for his father's house where Heinrich is living. Inside, they find dark clothing. Boots. Police scanners. And locked trunks. Inside the trunks, they find photographs. One shows a young boy in his underwear. Another shows a boy wearing only a towel, coming out of a shower. These are innocent, Heinrich tells the officers. It's not what it looks like. And here's the decision that will haunt this case forever. The investigators let him keep the photographs. They don't seize them as evidence. They don't arrest him for possession. They just let him keep them. Heinrich burns them later. Without enough evidence to charge him, the FBI releases Danny Heinrich. They move on to other suspects. And Danny Heinrich goes back to his normal life. For the next 26 years. The years pass. 1990. 1991. 1992. The case goes cold. Tips slow down. Media coverage fades. The search parties stop forming. Jacob's bedroom stays exactly as he left it. His stuffed animals on the bed. His posters on the walls. His hockey stick leaning in the corner. Waiting. But Patty Wetterling refuses to let the case die. She channels her grief into action. She testifies before Congress. She meets with legislators. She becomes a national advocate for missing children. In 1994, President Bill Clinton signs a new federal law. The Jacob Wetterling Crimes Against Children and Sexually Violent Offender Registration Act. The first federal law requiring states to establish sex offender registries. Before this law, a predator could move from Minnesota to California to Florida and nobody would know. They'd just disappear into a new community. New victims. Jacob's law ended that. It required sex offenders to register with local police. To update their addresses. To provide photographs and fingerprints. It was the first law of its kind in America. And it came from a mother who refused to let her son's disappearance be for nothing. Patty serves on the board of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. She becomes chair of the organization. She co-founds Team Hope, a support group for families of missing children. She travels the country speaking about child safety. But Jacob is still missing. And every night, that porch light stays on. Meanwhile, the investigation grinds on. Year after year after year. 1995. A hunter finds human remains in the woods near Priest River. The Wetterlings hold their breath. Is it Jacob? The forensic team works for 2 days examining the site. The results come back: male, approximately 60 years old. Natural causes. A transient who died camping in the woods. Not Jacob. The Wetterlings exhale. But the relief is tinged with despair. They're back to square one. 1998. A true crime TV show features Jacob's case. The phones light up with tips. Most are useless. Psychics claiming visions. Conspiracy theorists spinning elaborate tales. One caller says they saw a tan Buick in a ravine near Bonner's Ferry. Ray Holcomb: no wait, wrong case. Investigators follow up. They find a rusted-out Chevy from 1972. Not even close. 2000. 2001. 2002. The anniversaries blur together. The vigils get smaller. Rita's mother, Jacob's grandmother, passes away in 2006. She never got to know what happened to her grandson. The case is aging. The investigators are aging. The Wetterlings are aging. But they refuse to quit. 2004. A new sheriff takes office in Stearns County. John Sanner. He's 47 years old. Been with the department for 20 years. And he makes a public vow. We will solve the Wetterling case. Not, we'll try. Not, we'll do our best. We will solve it. His team starts looking at the evidence with fresh eyes. Every witness statement. Every tip. Every piece of physical evidence. The footprints. The tire tracks. The timeline. And they start to develop a new theory. What if the abductor didn't drive away? What if he did it on foot? Think about it. The tire tracks at the scene, what if those weren't from the abductor's vehicle? This theory is based on something that happened the night of the abduction. A man named Kevin was listening to a police scanner with his girlfriend. They heard the reports about a missing boy in St. Joseph. And they decided to drive out there. Just to see what was happening. They turned down the gravel driveway. The one where Jacob was taken. They did a U-turn in the driveway. And they saw the boys' bicycles lying in the ditch. They thought about picking them up. But decided against it. Then they left. Kevin had been telling this story at parties for years. As an icebreaker. Hey, you know that Jacob Wetterling case? I was there that night. In 2003, he told it to someone who happened to be a federal marshal. The marshal said, you need to report that to law enforcement. Now. So Kevin did. And to Sheriff Sanner's team, this was the missing piece. Kevin's car explained the tire tracks. Kevin's U-turn explained the vehicle Dan Rassier saw in his driveway. Which meant the abductor probably didn't use a car at all. Which meant he was on foot. Which meant he lived very close to where Jacob was taken. Very close. Like, at the end of that driveway. The driveway where the abduction occurred. Dan Rassier's driveway. Dan Rassier. Elementary school music teacher. 47 years old. Lives with his elderly parents. Single. Never married. Volunteers at church. Teaches private trumpet lessons. By all accounts, a quiet, normal guy. But he lives right there. At the end of the driveway. And on the night of the abduction, he was home alone. He saw a car in his driveway around 9 p.m. Right before Jacob was taken. To the investigators, this looks suspicious. Very suspicious. So they start watching him. 2005. 2006. 2007. 2008. 2009. They surveil his property. They interview his colleagues. They talk to his students. They dig into his background. Looking for anything. Any connection to Jacob. Any history of inappropriate behavior. They find nothing. Dan Rassier is exactly who he appears to be. A music teacher. A trumpet player. A guy who lives with his parents and keeps to himself. But the investigators are convinced. He's at the end of the driveway. He has to be involved somehow. And Dan knows they're watching him. He sees the cars parked down the road. He notices people following him. He feels the weight of suspicion every single day. His colleagues start avoiding him. Parents pull their kids out of his private lessons. The whispers start. Did you hear about Dan Rassier? I heard he's a suspect in the Wetterling case. I always thought he was weird. Dan tries to cooperate. He answers their questions. He lets them search his property multiple times. He has nothing to hide. But the more he cooperates, the more they suspect him. June 30, 2010. 21 years after Jacob disappeared. The investigators are ready to make their move. They've obtained a massive search warrant. At dawn, they descend on Dan Rassier's property. Stearns County Sheriff's Office. FBI agents. State crime investigators. Dozens of officers. Cadaver dogs. Ground-penetrating radar. Excavation equipment. And news helicopters. Lots of news helicopters. This is the biggest operation the county has seen since Jacob's disappearance. And it's all being broadcast live. Dan wakes up to the sound of vehicles. Voices. Dogs barking. He looks out the window and sees an army of law enforcement officers surrounding his house. His elderly mother is terrified. What's happening? She asks. Dan doesn't know. The officers present him with the warrant. They're going to dig up a specific area behind the property. Where Dan's family has been dumping ashes from their wood-burning stove for decades. They think Jacob might be buried there. Dan can't believe what he's hearing. I didn't do this, he tells them. I've told you everything I know. I saw a car that night. That's all. But they're not listening. The excavation begins. For 2 days, the world watches. News stations broadcast every shovel of dirt. Every sweep of the radar. Every movement of the cadaver dogs. Dan Rassier's face is on every screen in America. Primary suspect in Jacob Wetterling disappearance. The cameras zoom in on his property. His house. His face. He's being tried in the court of public opinion. And he's already been found guilty. The investigators dig. And dig. And dig. They sift through decades of ash. They bring in specialized equipment. They work around the clock. But they find nothing. No body. No clothing. No evidence of any kind. Because Jacob isn't there. He never was. After 2 days, the investigators pack up and leave. No arrests. No charges. Just a destroyed property and a ruined reputation. Dan Rassier stands in his yard looking at the massive holes in the ground. At the news vans pulling away. At the neighbors watching from their windows. And he knows his life will never be the same. For the next 6 years, Dan lives under a cloud of suspicion. He's never charged with anything. Never arrested. But in the public's mind, he's guilty. His private trumpet students stop calling. All of them. Parents at the school where he teaches request that their children be placed in different classes. His colleagues avoid eye contact. His friends stop inviting him to gatherings. He becomes isolated. Alone. The stress affects his health. His sleep. His mental state. He files complaints with the sheriff's office. "You've destroyed my life," he tells them. "And I didn't do anything." But the investigation continues to focus on him. They're sure he's involved. They're sure he knows something. They just can't prove it. Dan's parents stand by him. They know their son. They know he's innocent. But the weight of it all is crushing. His mother develops health problems. The stress of seeing her son persecuted. His father, in his 80s, tries to remain strong. But the family is breaking under the pressure. And all the while, the real killer is living quietly in Annandale. Danny Heinrich. Free. Watching the news coverage of Dan Rassier's persecution. Knowing he got away with it. While investigators destroyed Dan Rassier's life, the real killer was living quietly 30 miles away in Annandale, Minnesota. His name was Danny Heinrich. And he'd been free since December of 1989. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Because what happens next proves that sometimes the answer has been staring us in the face the entire time. 2014. 25 years after Jacob disappeared. Most people have moved on. The case is ancient history. But not everyone has forgotten. Joy Baker is a blogger. She runs a website dedicated to unsolved mysteries. And she's fascinated by the Jacob Wetterling case. She spends hours in library archives. Scrolling through old newspaper microfiche. Reading decades of coverage. One day, she stumbles across something. A series of articles from Paynesville, Minnesota. 1986 and 87. Paynesville is about 30 miles from St. Joseph. The articles describe a strange pattern of incidents. Boys being followed. Boys being grabbed. Boys being assaulted. Someone was targeting teenage boys as they walked home at night. Wearing a mask. Approaching them suddenly. Grabbing them. Touching them. Then disappearing into the darkness. The incidents happened over the course of about a year. Then stopped. No one was ever arrested. The cases were never solved. Joy starts documenting everything on her blog. She reaches out to people in Paynesville who remember the incidents. She creates timelines. Maps. Connections. And she starts to see a pattern. Paynesville, 1986 to 87, multiple assaults on boys. Cold Spring, January 1989, Jared Skirrell abducted and assaulted. St. Joseph, October 1989, Jacob Wetterling abducted. Same geographic area. Same type of victim, young boys. Same methods, masks, surprise attacks, sexual assault. Joy becomes convinced these cases are related. But she's just a blogger. Who's going to listen to her? Then she gets a message. From Jared Skirrell. Jared Skirl is 38 years old now. 25 years have passed since that night in January of '89. 25 years since a man pulled up beside him in a car and changed his life forever. For years, Jared tried to put it behind him. To move on. To forget. But you don't forget something like that. The trauma stays with you. In 2014, Jared and his family moved to Painesville. He's working as a real estate agent. Building a new life. And he starts hearing stories. Stories about assaults that happened in Painesville in the '80s. Stories that sound eerily familiar. A man in a mask. Attacking boys. The same thing that happened to him. Jared starts doing research. He talks to people who remember the incidents. He reads old newspaper articles. And then he finds Joy Baker's blog. She's documented everything. The timeline. The patterns. The connections. Jared reaches out to her. I think you're right, he tells her. I think these cases are connected. I think the person who assaulted me is the same person who took Jacob. Joy and Jared start working together. They compile evidence. They create detailed reports. And then they go to the authorities. You need to look at this again, they say. These cases are related. The investigators are skeptical at first. They've been down so many dead ends. Chased so many false leads. Why should they believe a blogger and a victim? But Joy and Jared are persistent. They show them the timeline. The patterns. The similarities. The investigators start to pay attention. And then someone remembers something. They still have the clothing Jared was wearing the night he was assaulted. 25 years ago, DNA testing was primitive. They could only do basic blood typing. Maybe some simple genetic markers. But now they have advanced DNA profiling. They can extract genetic material from skin cells. From sweat. From the tiniest traces of biological evidence. In 2015, they send Jared's clothing to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. The BC extracts a DNA profile from the wrist of Jared's sweatshirt. It's a male DNA profile. Not Jared's. The DNA of whoever grabbed his wrist that night in January of '89. Now they need to compare it to suspects. They start pulling old evidence from the Jacob Wetterling investigation. Hair samples. Clothing samples. Anything with potential DNA. And they find samples from a man who was questioned in December of '89. A man who lived in Painesville. A man whose shoes matched the footprints at the Wetterling crime scene. A man whose tires matched the tracks. Danny Heinrich. They compare Heinrich's DNA to the profile from Jared's sweatshirt. And they get a match. 99.5% certainty. Danny Heinrich assaulted Jared Skirl. Which means Danny Heinrich is almost certainly the person who took Jacob Wetterling. After 25 years, they finally have him. But there's a massive problem. The statute of limitations. In Minnesota, the statute of limitations for most sexual assaults is 9 years. Jared was assaulted in January of 1989. It's now 2015. 26 years later. They can't charge Heinrich for what he did to Jared. The law won't allow it. It's one of the cruelest ironies of the case. They have DNA proof that Heinrich assaulted Jared. They can prove he did it. But they can't charge him for it. The investigators are furious. Devastated. Jared is devastated. He came forward. He helped solve the case. He gave them the DNA evidence. And there will be no justice for what happened to him. But the DNA match does give them something. Probable cause for a search warrant. They can search Heinrich's home. They can search for evidence of other crimes. And that's exactly what they're going to do. July 28, 2015. Investigators descend on Danny Heinrich's home in Annandale. What they find inside is horrifying. In a kitchen drawer, duct tape and handcuffs. 4 large bins, filled with boys' clothing. Dozens of VHS tapes, footage Heinrich recorded of young boys at parks, pools, playgrounds. 19 binders, child pornography. They arrest him on the spot. 25 counts of possession and receipt of child pornography. Not for Jacob. Not for Jared. For the images on his computer and the tapes in his house. But it's enough to hold him. In October of 2015, the FBI publicly names Danny Heinrich as a person of interest in Jacob Wetterling's disappearance. The news hits Minnesota like a bomb. For Dan Rassier, who's been living under suspicion for 6 years, it's vindication. But also devastation. The damage is already done. His reputation destroyed. His career ruined. He'll later file a lawsuit against the sheriff's office. The courts will dismiss it on a technicality. Statute of limitations. The same legal loophole that let Heinrich avoid charges for assaulting Jared. Danny Heinrich sits in jail for nearly a year. Waiting for trial on the child pornography charges. His lawyers review the evidence against him. The 19 binders of child pornography. The VHS tapes of boys. The bins of children's clothing. The duct tape and handcuffs. It's overwhelming. Their client is going to prison. That's certain. The only question is for how long. And whether he'll ever face charges for Jacob Wetterling. 3 weeks before trial, Heinrich's lawyers approached the prosecution with an offer. A plea deal. Heinrich will confess to everything. He'll tell them exactly what happened to Jacob Wetterling. He'll lead them to Jacob's remains. In exchange, he'll only be charged with 1 count of child pornography. Maximum sentence, 20 years in federal prison. No murder charges. No kidnapping charges. Just 1 count of possession of child pornography. For the prosecutors, it's a difficult decision. They want justice for Jacob. They want the maximum sentence possible. But they also want answers. They want to bring Jacob home. And without a confession, without Jacob's body, they might never get those answers. They take the offer to Patty and Jerry Wetterling. For the Wetterlings, it's an impossible choice. 20 years feels like nothing. Nothing compared to what their son went through. Nothing compared to 27 years of not knowing. Nothing compared to a lifetime of grief. But they need answers. They need to know what happened to their boy. They need to bring him home and give him a proper burial. Jerry and Patty talk it over. They pray. They agonize. And they make their decision. They agree to the plea deal. September 6, 2016. United States District Court. Minneapolis, Minnesota. The courtroom is packed. Media. Law enforcement. Victim advocates. Members of the community who followed this case for 27 years. And the Wetterling family. Patty and Jerry. Trevor and Carmen. Jacob's siblings who've lived their entire lives in the shadow of his disappearance. Danny Heinrich is brought in. He's 53 years old now. Gray hair. Glasses. Ordinary looking. He looks like someone's uncle. Someone's neighbor. He doesn't look like a monster. But that's the thing about monsters. They rarely look the part. Judge John Tunheim presides. The plea agreement is entered into the record. And then it's time for Heinrich to confess. His voice is calm. Flat. Almost emotionless. Like he's reading a grocery list instead of confessing to murder. On October 22, 1989, he begins, I was driving around St. Joseph, Minnesota. I saw 3 boys on bicycles heading into town. I decided to wait for them to come back. In the courtroom, people lean forward. Hanging on every word. For 27 years, they've wondered. Now they're finally going to know. Heinrich describes parking his car at the end of Dan Rassier's driveway. Walking down to the road. Waiting in the shadows. When the boys returned from the video store, he was ready. I was wearing a stocking cap mask. I had a revolver. I told them to stop and get off their bikes. He describes ordering the boys into the ditch. Asking their ages. Sending Trevor running into the woods. Then Aaron. I handcuffed Jacob Wetterling. I led him to my car. I put him in the front passenger seat. Patty Wetterling closes her eyes. Tears streaming down her face. This is what she's waited 27 years to hear. And it's destroying her. Heinrich continues. As I was driving away, Jacob was crying. He kept asking, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? In the courtroom, people are crying. An 11-year-old boy. Handcuffed. Being driven away by a stranger. Asking what he did wrong. Because that's what kids do. They blame themselves. They think if they're being punished, they must have done something bad. Jacob thought he was being punished for something. He didn't understand that he was the victim of a monster. Heinrich describes driving around St. Joseph with Jacob in the car. He had a police scanner. He could hear the search starting. Radio chatter. Officers being dispatched. The search mobilizing. He told Jacob to get down low in the seat so they wouldn't be seen. He drove toward Painesville. To a gravel pit he knew about. A remote location where no one would disturb them. When they arrived, Heinrich ordered Jacob out of the car. He removed the handcuffs. And then he told Jacob to take off his clothes. The courtroom is silent. The kind of silence that feels heavy. Suffocating. Everyone knows what's coming next. Heinrich's voice remains flat. Emotionless. I sexually assaulted Jacob Wetterling. Simple words for an unspeakable act. Afterward, Jacob was crying. He was cold. He said, I want to go home. Patty makes a sound. A broken sob. Her baby. Her 11-year-old boy. Cold and scared and wanting to come home. Heinrich told Jacob to get dressed. And as Jacob was putting his clothes back on, a patrol car drove past the area. The officers weren't specifically searching that road. They were just passing through. But the sight of those police lights sent Heinrich into a panic. He thought they'd found him. He thought it was over. I told Jacob to turn around. Heinrich raised his revolver. Pointed it at the back of Jacob's head. Pulled the trigger. The gun jammed. Jacob was standing there. Frozen. Terrified. 11 years old. Knowing he was about to die. Heinrich cleared the chamber. Raised the gun again. Pulled the trigger. This time it fired. The bullet struck Jacob in the back of the head. He fell to the ground. Dead. In the courtroom, the silence is absolute. This is the moment everyone has dreaded for 27 years. The confirmation that Jacob didn't survive. That he didn't escape. That he didn't grow up somewhere with amnesia, not knowing who he was. All those hopes. All those possibilities. Gone. Jacob Wetterling died on October 22, 1989. Within hours of being taken. He was 11 years old. Heinrich continues his confession. His voice still flat. Still emotionless. I left Jacob's body there and drove home. Later that night, I returned with a shovel. I tried to dig a grave by hand, but the ground was too hard. So I went to a nearby construction site and took a bobcat, a piece of heavy machinery. I used it to dig a hole. I buried Jacob. Then I returned the bobcat to where I found it. Before leaving, Heinrich realized he'd forgotten something. Jacob's shoes. He took them and threw them into a nearby ravine. About 1 year later, I became concerned that the body might be discovered. So I returned to the site. I used the bobcat again to exhume the remains. I moved them to a nearby farm property. I buried them in a shallow grave, approximately 2 feet deep, in a cow pasture. He covered the grave with grass. And left. For 25 more years. Heinrich finishes his confession. The judge asks if he has anything else to say. Heinrich shakes his head. No apology. No expression of remorse. Nothing. The Wetterling family sits in stunned silence. They finally know what happened to their son. But knowing is almost worse than not knowing. Because now they have to live with the knowledge of Jacob's last moments. His fear. His pain. His confusion. What did I do wrong? Those words will haunt them for the rest of their lives. September 1, 2016. 5 days before Heinrich's confession. A team of investigators arrives at a farm property outside Painesville. Heinrich has told them where to look. They're prepared with metal detectors. Ground-penetrating radar. Excavation equipment. They're looking for the metal buttons on Jacob's red hockey jacket. The jacket that's been featured on missing person flyers for 27 years. The team approaches the area Heinrich described. A cow pasture. Unremarkable. Just grass and dirt. They power up the metal detectors. But before they can even begin scanning, one of the investigators sees something. He stops walking. Stares at the ground. And his heart sinks. There, barely visible among the grass, is a small piece of fabric. Red fabric. Weathered by 27 years of Minnesota weather. 27 winters of snow and ice. 27 springs of rain. 27 summers of sun. 27 autumns of wind. That small fragment of Jacob's jacket has been there the entire time. Partially exposed. Visible to anyone who walked past. But no one ever walked past. Because no one knew to look here. The investigator calls the others over. They mark the site. And they begin the careful process of excavation. Removing the soil inch by inch. Documenting everything. And they find him. Jacob Wetterling. Bones. Teeth. Fragments of clothing. A t-shirt with his name on it. And that red St. Cloud hockey jacket. The same one he was wearing when he said goodbye to his sister Carmen on that October night in 1989. The same one his mother had bought him because red was his favorite color. The same one that appeared on 10,000 missing person flyers. It's here. He's here. After 27 years, Jacob is finally coming home. The forensic anthropologist carefully examines the remains. The bones tell a story. The size and development indicate a child. Approximately 11 years old. The dental records are compared to Jacob's dental x-rays from before he disappeared. It's a match. Confirmed. These are the remains of Jacob Irwin Wetterling. The investigation that consumed 27 years. That involved thousands of investigators. That generated 70,000 tips. That mobilized National Guard troops and FBI agents and volunteers by the thousands. That dominated newspaper headlines and television broadcasts. That changed American law. That ended an era of innocence. It all ends here. In a cow pasture outside Painesville, Minnesota. 30 miles from where Jacob was taken. September 3, 2016. The Wetterling family receives the call. The remains have been positively identified. It's Jacob. Patty and Jerry are at home when they get the news. The home where they've kept a porch light burning for 27 years. The home where Jacob's bedroom has remained untouched. The home where they've lit birthday candles on cupcakes every February 17th. The news they've waited for. The news they've dreaded. Jacob has been found. But he's not coming home alive. Patty later describes that moment as the death of hope. For 27 years, she'd held on to the possibility that Jacob was out there somewhere. Alive. Growing up. Maybe with amnesia. Maybe brainwashed. Maybe trapped. But alive. That hope, as painful as it was to maintain, had kept her going. It had fueled her advocacy work. It had given her a reason to get up every morning. And now that hope is gone. Replaced by the terrible certainty of knowing. Jacob died on October 22, 1989. Within hours of being taken. He never had a chance. The news breaks across Minnesota and then across the nation. 27 years of waiting ends with a phone call. The story dominates every news broadcast. Newspapers run special editions. The internet explodes with reactions. For people who followed the case for decades, it's like losing him all over again. Even though they knew the odds. Even though they understood what 27 years usually means in a missing child case. There was always that tiny, irrational hope. Maybe this case would be different. Maybe Jacob would be one of the rare ones who comes home alive. But he's not. He's gone. And he's been gone this whole time. Patty Wetterling makes a statement to the press. She can barely speak through her tears. All I can confirm is that Jacob has been found. Our hearts are broken. I have no words. It's one of the shortest statements she's ever made. After 27 years of talking to reporters, of doing interviews, of pleading for information, she has nothing left to say. Jerry stands beside her. His arm around her shoulders. He doesn't speak. What is there to say? Their son is dead. Has been dead for 27 years. And the man who killed him will serve only 20 years in prison. Trevor and Carmen, Jacob's siblings, are there too. Trevor was 10 years old the night his brother was taken. He's 37 now. He spent more of his life without Jacob than with him. But the guilt of that night has never left him. Run into the woods. Don't look back. He ran. He survived. And Jacob didn't. Trevor has struggled with that for 27 years. Survivor's guilt mixed with the trauma of witnessing his brother's abduction. He's had to build a life in the shadow of that night. Everyone knows him as Jacob Wetterling's brother. The boy who was there when Jacob was taken. Carmen was only 8 years old when Jacob disappeared. She barely remembers him. Her memories of Jacob are mixed with photographs and stories and the mythology that built up around him over the years. She's grown up in a family defined by absence. By grief. By a tragedy that happened before she could fully understand it. Both Trevor and Carmen have had to live with the weight of Jacob's disappearance their entire lives. And now they have to live with the weight of knowing exactly how he died. September 6, 2016. 3 days after the remains are identified. Heinrich's confession in court. The Wetterling family sits through every word. They listen to the details they've waited 27 years to hear. And it's agony. Every word is a knife. Patty will later say that knowing is both better and worse than not knowing. Better because the questions are finally answered. Worse because now she has to live with the answers. She has to live with the knowledge of what her son went through in those final hours. The fear. The confusion. The pain. What did I do wrong? Those words will echo in her mind for the rest of her life. November 15, 2016. Danny Heinrich's sentencing hearing. He receives 20 years in federal prison for possession of child pornography. Not for murder. Not for kidnapping. Not for sexually assaulting multiple children over multiple years. For child pornography. United States Attorney Andrew Luger addresses the court. Danny Heinrich is no longer a person of interest. He is the confessed murderer of Jacob Wetterling. After nearly 27 years of uncertainty, after one of the most extensive missing persons investigations in American history, after thousands of tips and countless hours of investigative work, Danny Heinrich has finally been brought to justice. And Jacob Wetterling is finally home. But the word justice feels hollow in this context. 20 years. Heinrich will be eligible for release in 2036. He'll be 73 years old. He could still have years of freedom ahead of him. While Jacob will be forever 11. Sheriff John Sanner speaks. Jacob Wetterling's abduction on October 22, 1989, ended an age of innocence for central Minnesota and beyond. It changed how we live. How we raise our children. How we think about safety. The hope of resolving this case and bringing Jacob home never faltered. And while the ending is not what any of us hoped or prayed for, Jacob is finally home. And we will never forget him. Patty Wetterling is given the opportunity to speak. She stands. Her voice shaking but strong. I want to say to Jacob, I'm so sorry. It's incredibly painful to know your last days, your last hours, your last minutes. We love you, Jacob. We always have. We always will. And we will continue to fight for children everywhere in your name. For 27 years, you were alive in our hearts and minds. We held on to hope because it was the only way to survive. But now we know the truth. And while the truth has broken our hearts, it has also freed us. We can finally grieve. We can finally say goodbye. We can finally lay you to rest. Our hearts are hurting. They will always hurt. But we will heal. Slowly. Together. And your legacy will live on in every law that bears your name, in every child who is protected because of your story, in every family who receives justice because we refuse to give up. She also takes a moment to address others who were affected by the investigation. I want to acknowledge those who were investigated over the years. Those whose names were mentioned. Those who lived under suspicion. Dan Rassier and others who were impacted by this long search for truth. We are sorry for the pain this caused. We are grateful for your patience and your understanding. It's a moment of grace. An acknowledgement that the search for Jacob left scars on many people. Not just the Wetterlings. Jacob Wetterling was laid to rest in a private funeral service. No public memorial. Just close family and friends. The people who walked with the Wetterlings through 10,000 days of not knowing. The Jacob Wetterling Resource Center continues its work today. Educating families about child safety. Supporting families of missing children through Team Hope. Advocating for policies that protect kids. Patty Wetterling still travels the country speaking at conferences and training sessions. She's received numerous awards. The Minneapolis Star-Tribune named her one of the 100 most influential Minnesotans of the century. Joy Baker, the blogger who helped break the case, co-authored a memoir with Patty. Dear Jacob, A Mother's Journey of Hope. It includes letters Patty wrote to Jacob over the years. Letters she wrote but never sent. Because there was no address to send them to. Jared Skirrell, who survived his assault and whose courage helped solve Jacob's case, received a $17 million civil judgment against Heinrich. Heinrich will never pay it. But the judgment acknowledges the harm he caused. Jared has spoken publicly about his experience. Advocating for other survivors. Encouraging them to come forward. His willingness to share his story played a crucial role in bringing Heinrich to justice. Today, St. Joseph looks much like it did in 1989. Quiet streets. Modest homes. Tall trees. But something fundamental has changed. Kids don't ride their bikes to the store after dark anymore. Parents don't let their children play outside unsupervised the way they once did. The sense of safety that defined small-town America is gone. Replaced by vigilance. By awareness. By the knowledge that danger can come from anywhere. Jacob Wetterling's case ended an age of innocence. Not just for his family. For all of us. But Jacob's legacy is more than tragedy. The Jacob Wetterling Act fundamentally changed American law enforcement. Before 1994, sex offenders could disappear after serving their sentences. Move from state to state. Vanish into new communities. The Wetterling Act created registries. Required monitoring. Made sure offenders couldn't hide. It paved the way for Megan's Law in 1996. And the Adam Walsh Act in 2006. Every sex offender registry in America traces its lineage back to a small town in Minnesota. And an 11-year-old boy who never came home. Jacob's name is now synonymous with child safety legislation. His face, forever 11 years old in his school photo, has become a symbol of both tragedy and transformation. His case changed how we raise our children. How we think about safety. How law enforcement tracks predators. In trying to erase one boy from the world, Danny Heinrich ensured that Jacob Wetterling would never be forgotten. The investigation lasted 27 years. Thousands of interviews. Tens of thousands of tips. 70,000 documented leads. Searches by National Guard troops, helicopters, bloodhounds. Volunteers walking shoulder to shoulder through fields and forests. One of the most extensive missing child investigations in American history. And the answer was there from the beginning. Danny Heinrich was interviewed in December of 1989. His name was in the files since the first month. His shoes matched the prints. His tires matched the tracks. He had suspicious photos of boys. He lived in Painesville where a pattern of assaults had occurred. All the pieces were there. Scattered across jurisdictions. Waiting for someone to connect them. It took 27 years. The persistence of a blogger. The courage of a survivor. And advances in DNA technology. To finally bring the truth to light. The small piece of red fabric sticking out of that cow pasture is a haunting reminder. For 27 years, Jacob's remains lay in that field. While helicopters flew overhead. While bloodhounds searched miles away. While investigators pursued wrong leads. While innocent people suffered under suspicion. The answer was there all along. 30 miles from where Jacob was taken. Waiting to be found. Danny Heinrich destroyed multiple lives. Jacob's. Jared's. The unknown victims in Painesville. Countless others who may never come forward. He stole 27 years from the Wetterling family. 27 years of wondering. Hoping. Grieving without resolution. He destroyed Dan Rassier's reputation and peace of mind. He shattered the innocence of an entire generation of American parents. But he didn't destroy Patty Wetterling's spirit. He didn't stop her from fighting for other children. He didn't prevent the passage of laws that have protected millions of children across this country. He didn't silence Jacob's name. Jacob's legacy lives on. In every sex offender registry in America. In every Amber Alert that goes out when a child goes missing. In every parent who teaches their child about stranger danger. In every law enforcement agency that takes missing children cases seriously from the first moment. The Jacob Wetterling case stands as both a cautionary tale and a testament to persistence. It shows us how investigations can go wrong. How tunnel vision can lead detectives astray. How legal technicalities can prevent justice. How predators can hide in plain sight for decades. But it also shows us the power of ordinary people. A mother who refused to give up. A blogger who researched tirelessly. A survivor who found the courage to come forward. They changed the course of history. They proved that cold cases can be solved. That technology advances. That truth can emerge no matter how deeply it's been buried. 27 years is a long time to wait for answers. It's a lifetime for some. An eternity for a family in grief. But the Wetterlings waited. And they fought. And they transformed their personal tragedy into a force for change that protected countless other children. That is Jacob's legacy. Not the way he died, but the way his life, and his mother's love, changed America forever. Thank you for staying with us through this difficult but important story. Jacob Wetterling's case reminds us why we do what we do here at Cold Case Beacon. To keep these stories alive. To ensure the truth is never buried. To honor the victims by never forgetting their names. If this story moved you, take a moment right now to subscribe to Cold Case Beacon. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts or where you're watching from. And share this video with someone who cares about justice and truth. Together, we can keep shining a light on the cases that matter. The ones that changed our world. And the ones still waiting to be solved. Until next time, stay vigilant. Stay informed. And never stop seeking the truth. This is Cold Case Beacon. And Jacob Wetterling's name will never be forgotten.